Welcome back, fellow scholars, to this explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this rigorous application of our established 11-step diagnostic framework, turning it directly onto Chapter 7 of Nāgārjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika. Now, because we're speaking among peers who already deeply grasp the deconstruction of causality, motion, and perception from the previous chapters, we definitely aren't going to spend time hashing out the basic mechanics of emptiness. Instead, we're taking our analytical scalpel to the very nature of macroscopic composites. You know, the visible, tangible world all around us.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the triad of macroscopic composites. Then, applying the Madhyamaka tetralemma. Next, the union of two truths, followed by transcending the ontological extremes. And finally, abiding in reality as suchness. So let's systematically dismantle this concept of macroscopic composites.
Kicking things off with Part 1, the triad of macroscopic composites. Since we already know exactly where the tetralemma leads, let's jump straight to Step 1 of our diagnostic by targeting the specific triad of this chapter.
We have to identify exactly what conceptual spheres our minds are projecting onto reality. We're plugging three precise conceptual spheres into our Madhyamaka equation today. Just like we looked at the perceiver, the perception, and the perceived back in Chapter 3, here we're looking at the characterization of reality itself. We've got the subject, meaning the characteristics of composites. We have the relation, the action of characterizing. And we have the object, the characterized macroscopic composites themselves. We really must remember that in Chapter 7, our characterized objects aren't invisible, irreducible elements, but visible macroscopic composites. These are defined conventionally by three distinct phases of existence. Origination, meaning the beginning or coming into being. Duration, meaning the middle, the staying, or subtly changing state. And cessation, meaning the ending or perishing. Our biological brains literally wire themselves around these markers just to survive and categorize the world.
Moving right along to Part 2, applying the Madhyamaka tetralemma. Let's subject these characteristics to the ultimate stress test in Step 2.
We're going to see if these phases of existence can possibly hold up as absolute independent realities. We begin by analyzing the relation of identity. Are the characteristics, origination, duration, cessation, identical to the composite they describe, or are they different? Well, if the characteristics and the composite were inherently identical, the distinction between the definition and the defined would completely collapse. A car and its movement would be the exact same indistinguishable concept. But if they were entirely separate, locked in their own absolute bubbles, the characteristics could never actually apply to the composite. A fundamentally still object could never cross the gap to acquire the characteristic of motion. Both of these extremes completely paralyze the functional universe.
This brilliantly illustrates that, exactly like our analysis of causality in Chapter 1, origination, duration, and cessation absolutely cannot self-originate or other-originate without breaking the mechanics of the universe. Think about it. If origination originates itself, you have an infinite regress. It's the origination of the origination of the origination forever. If it originates from an entirely separate other, you introduce a completely broken circular dependency. The tetralemma proves that neither both nor neither can rescue these concepts either. Because every single extreme position we test just leads to an absolute contradiction, we arrive at Step 3. We have to conclude that the absolute characterization of any composite is an ontological impossibility. These three spheres, the characteristics, the characterizing, and the characterized, are completely empty of inherent existence, or svabha. They simply never exist absolutely from their own side.
Which brings us nicely to Part 3. The union of two truths. This is where we examine the actual mechanics of illusion.
If things are empty, how on earth do we still experience them functioning so flawlessly in our conventional reality? Well, the crucial point here is that Steps 4, 5, and 6 logically stack together to show that macroscopic composites are functionally present but ultimately lack a frozen, absolute essence. From emptiness, we deduce Step 4, dependent co-origination. The characteristics and the composite literally define each other in a limitless, centerless cycle. Step 5 points out the union of the two truths. Their very lack of an absolute core is exactly what allows them to functionally arise and change. And Step 6 concludes their illusory nature.
These dependently co-arisen spheres are merely co-imputed by the mind as conventional tools. They act exactly like an echo bouncing off a canyon wall. Conventionally, sure, the echo is undeniably there. You hear it, it startles the birds. But if you try to reach out and grab the absolute, independent core of that sound wave with your bare hands, you just grab empty air. It is very much there, yet completely not there.
Okay, part 4, transcending the ontological extremes. To prevent us from reifying this emptiness into a new religion, step 7 demands we deploy the generalized tetralemma.
The human mind is so desperate to turn this profound philosophical realization into a comfortable new box to hide inside. We must systematically avoid these 4 extreme ontological views, affirming that the triad is not this, not non-this, not both, and not neither. We reject objectivism because things lack inherent existence. We reject nihilism because things absolutely do function conventionally. We reject dualism because it just stubbornly combines 2 already broken extremes. And we fiercely reject monism or radical oneness because reality is not some featureless cosmic soup that erases all conventional boundaries.
Reaching step 9, we affirm the middle way as the only viable attitude. That means there is absolutely nothing to accept, seek, or add in absolute terms. It's a path entirely free from all extremes. It's kind of like riding a bicycle. You don't maintain your balance by freezing rigidly in the center, you maintain it through dynamic, continuous micro-adjustments, completely free from the grasping of eternalism and the apathy of nihilism.
And finally, part 5, abiding in reality as suchness. We have arrived at the ultimate cosmic implications of our diagnostic in steps 10 and 11.
How do we actually live and function with this profound understanding? Step 10 tells us to act conventionally without acting in absolute terms. We act without acting. We skillfully utilize the concepts of origination, duration, and cessation as handy tools to navigate the relative world, while fully knowing their completely empty nature. You use the heavy wooden raft of these concepts to cross the river of confusion, but once you reach the shore, you absolutely do not carry that heavy philosophy on your back.
Freed from the tyrannical hold of dualistic concepts, we abide in reality exactly as it is, recognizing the seamless, centerless fractal cycle of existence. Step 11 points us directly to suchness, or tathata. In this state, we perceive the entire dependently co-horizon web as primordially equal and one. But remember, this is one strictly in the non-dual sense, meaning not many, not one, not both, and not neither. It's a shared, interdependent emptiness, not a blended soup.
Because the 3 spheres are empty, Chapter 7 concludes that there is no real beginning, middle, or end for any composite, entity, or cycle. If we cannot establish origination, duration, or cessation as absolute facts, then the grandest macro-duality of them all, the difference between composites and non-composites, completely dissolves. Reality is just a seamless flow that our minds merely chop up into digestible pieces.
Since we've logically dissolved the very mechanics of time and matter today, I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. If origination and cessation are mere conventional echoes, where does that leave the past, present, and future in your own immediate experience? The heavy burdens of past regrets and future anxieties are completely empty too. Use these concepts to plan your day for sure, but don't let them crush you. Just rest in the suchness of the present.